For many centuries, the Spartans deservedly held a reputation as the most formidable and invincible warriors in all of Hellas. Their fame resounded far beyond the Peloponnese, and their unparalleled combat prowess struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. From early childhood, barely reaching the age of 7, Spartan boys were immersed in a brutal system of preparation for deadly combat, transforming them into cogs in a relentless war machine. A unique feature of their society was that even the kings, who stood at the head of this mighty state, did not shy away from the dangers of war, valiantly fighting shoulder to shoulder with their warriors on the battlefield. When the Spartan army began its triumphant march, it seemed that nothing could halt its inexorable advance across Greek lands. However, like all empires in the world, even Sparta was not immune to decline. This naturally raises a compelling question: what ultimately happened to this great and once invincible civilization? History, full of unexpected twists, reveals a paradoxical fact: their greatest strength, the very thing that elevated them to the pinnacle of power, ultimately became the cause of their tragic downfall. According to ancient lore, the origins of Sparta are rooted in a mythological era, with its founder believed to be Lacedaemon himself, the valiant son of the supreme god Zeus. This captivating legend undoubtedly lends an air of divine grandeur to the city's history. However, when researchers turn to more rigorous historical and archaeological evidence, a different, though no less fascinating, picture emerges. Scientific studies indicate that Sparta was founded around 1000 BC. Its emergence is associated with the activities of an unknown, yet undoubtedly influential, ruler who led a group of tribes belonging to the warlike Dorian people into this fertile region. Nevertheless, the mystery of Sparta's founding does not end there. Some historians suggest a possible link between its origin and the legendary king Menelaus, whose name is inextricably tied to the epic events of the Trojan War. Despite the fact that precise details about Sparta's founder remain veiled by time, one thing is undeniable: whoever founded this unique city-state laid the groundwork for one of the most powerful and warlike civilizations ever to exist in the world. The city-state of Sparta, like a meteor, soared upwards, continuously consolidating its power and expanding its sphere of influence. Throughout its rich history, this unusual state was governed simultaneously by two kings, representing a unique political system unparalleled in ancient Greece. Spartan society was entirely devoted to military affairs, and every citizen, from a young age, was raised in a spirit of boundless devotion and selfless service to the state, which ultimately played a decisive role in its historical destiny. From birth, every infant in Spartan society underwent a thorough inspection by a council of elders, respected members of the community. These wise men identified any flaws or deficiencies in the newborn, and if a child was deemed unviable or unfit for future service to Sparta, its fate was sealed. It was left on the slope of a nearby hill. Some ancient traditions, shrouded in grim legends, even claim that unhealthy infants were mercilessly thrown from the summit of Mount Taygetus into the gaping abyss of a deep gorge. However, the latest archaeological and historical research, shedding light on the past, suggests that the Spartans may have shown more compassion and care in raising their children, even if they were not in impeccable physical health. Nevertheless, if a child suffered from a serious disability, it was highly unlikely that they would have been able to withstand the rigorous training regime that every Spartan boy had to undergo from the age of 7. This unique military educational program, known as the agoge, served as a distinctive feature that set Spartan warriors apart from all other Greeks. Spartan children were voluntarily handed over to the state by their parents, where they began long years of training, learning the true meaning of what it meant to be a true Spartan. Throughout this intensive education, they were tirelessly instilled with the idea that loyalty to Sparta must take precedence over everything else in their lives. This absolute obedience included prioritizing the state over family ties, personal enrichment, or the thirst for power. From an early age, a Spartan child was taught to be ruthless and deadly in combat, never to disobey the orders of their commanders or kings. This unwavering loyalty and outstanding combat skills, acquired from a young age, transformed Spartan warriors into a formidable and deadly force on any battlefield. In 480 BC, throughout ancient Hellas, the fame of Spartan warriors resounded. Legends were woven about their incomparable valor, and their exceptional strength was sung in epic poems. It was at this fateful moment in history that King Leonidas led his legendary detachment of 300 Spartans, joined by Athenians and representatives of other Greek city-states, to confront the countless army of the Persian king Xerxes. At the hot gates of Thermopylae, these fearless warriors heroically held back the onslaught of the Persian armada for 3 days. Whatever forces Xerxes threw into battle, King Leonidas and his comrades steadfastly repelled attack after attack. Even the elite Persian warriors, known as the Immortals, could not break the Spartan defense and suffered a crushing defeat. However, the fate of Leonidas and his valiant warriors was sealed by the betrayal of a fellow Greek, who showed Xerxes a secret mountain pass, allowing the Persians to outflank the Spartan positions. As a result of this treacherous act, the Spartans found themselves encircled. The sacrifice of King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans at Thermopylae is forever etched in the annals of history and has become a true legend. Their self-sacrifice gave the Greek people precious time to mobilize their forces and subsequently expel the Persians from their homeland. Approximately half a century after their triumph in the Persian Wars, Athens and Sparta established themselves as the two dominant powers in ancient Greece. Each sought to expand its influence throughout Hellas, which inevitably generated deep contradictions and tension between the two great civilizations. These contradictions quickly escalated into a large-scale armed conflict, known to history as the Peloponnesian Wars. The outcome of the confrontation was Sparta's elevation to the status of the most powerful city-state in all of Greece. However, this victory, ironically, became a harbinger of its own decline. In the period between the end of the Persian War and the start of the First Peloponnesian War, Athens and Sparta were in a state of permanent confrontation, expressed through frequent border clashes and mutual raids. These incidents, which resulted in casualties and resource depletion, did not escalate into full-scale war. The situation changed in the cold months of 445 BC, when a peace treaty, intended to last for 3 decades, was concluded between Sparta and Athens. However, in 431 BC, Corinth, one of Sparta's key allies, entered into conflict with Athenian forces. In response, Athens invaded Corinthian territory, and Sparta immediately came to the defense of its ally. Thus, the terms of the 30 Years' Peace were violated, serving as the catalyst for the start of the Second Peloponnesian War. In antiquity, when Greek city-states waged incessant wars, Sparta and Athens, the two most influential city-states, engaged in a protracted and bitter confrontation. Sparta, whose military might was concentrated on land, launched large-scale campaigns against Athenian territories. Spartan warriors, known for their discipline and fearlessness, systematically destroyed enemy fortifications, plundered cities, and seized fertile lands, seeking to undermine Athens' economic foundation. However, the Athenians, realizing their helplessness in open land battles, gambled on naval power. Their fleet, consisting of fast and maneuverable ships, dominated the Aegean Sea, allowing them to inflict painful blows on Spartan possessions. Long before the Persian Wars, Athens had systematically begun building an impressive armada capable of daring raids along the Peloponnesian coast. Athenian ships, like marine predators, suddenly appeared off the coasts, landing assault forces that swiftly attacked Spartan settlements. Before the Spartans could redeploy their land forces to repel the attack, the Athenians had already vanished into the sea, preparing for their next strike. The result was a stalemate. Sparta could not take the impregnable Athens, protected by powerful walls, and the Athenian army could not defeat the Spartan hoplites on land. In 421 BC, after many years of bloody struggle, both sides concluded the Peace of Nicias, committing to mutual defense for 50 years. It seemed that the two mighty city-states, having reached the peak of their power, had finally found a way to coexist in peace. However, these hopes proved illusory, and the truce was merely a temporary respite before a new wave of conflicts. Just 6 years after the signing of the peace treaty, which seemingly promised long-awaited tranquility, Sparta once again ignited the flames of war, challenging Athenian dominance. The Spartan city-state, having reached the pinnacle of its power, cast its gaze upon new territories and resources, driven by an insatiable thirst for power. Sparta did not seek to impose its unique social model on the rest of Greece, where citizenship was a privilege reserved for those belonging to specific lineages. However, expanding the empire to increase the number of helots in the army and enrich the Spartan elite remained its primary goal. This time, all allies of both city-states were drawn into the massive conflict, transforming the Delian League led by Athens and the Peloponnesian League led by Sparta into the epicenter of an unprecedented war that plunged the Greek world into chaos for many years. In 420 BC, Sparta faced severe condemnation for violating the sacred truce of the Olympic Games, further destabilizing the situation in Greece. The culmination of this exhausting war was the crushing defeat of the Athenian fleet by the Spartans at the Battle of Aegospotami in 404 BC. Learning from past mistakes, Sparta realized that to finally defeat Athens, it needed to neutralize its powerful fleet. Between the Peloponnesian Wars, the Spartans actively invested in developing their own navy, aiming to surpass the Athenian one. And it was the Spartan general Lysander, leading the revitalized fleet, who achieved a triumphant victory at Aegospotami, bringing an end to years of confrontation. Despite its victory in the Peloponnesian Wars and a significant expansion of influence in Greece, Sparta faced impending decline. Having become the most powerful city-state, it suffered from a severe demographic problem. Sparta's expansion was not driven by overpopulation, but by a dwindling number of its citizens. As a result, the Spartans found themselves outnumbered in the conquered territories. The Peloponnesian War dealt a heavy blow to Sparta's demographics, claiming the lives of many citizens. Every victory, however significant, brought bitterness, as it demanded irreplaceable sacrifices among the Spartan warriors. After the exhausting confrontation with Athens, Sparta faced an urgent need to increase its population to replenish the enormous manpower losses suffered in battles. Without a powerful and numerous army, maintaining control over a vast empire became virtually impossible. However, despite recognizing this critical demographic problem, Spartan society seemed to take no decisive action to resolve it. Instead of focusing efforts on population growth and strengthening internal stability, Sparta continued to engage in military campaigns wherever it deemed necessary. With the acquisition of a dominant position in Greece, the traditional conservatism of Spartan society seemingly began to wane, giving way to an insatiable desire among its citizens for even greater power and wealth. Spartan armed forces systematically violated previously concluded alliances and invaded new territories, which, in turn, inevitably provoked numerous revolts throughout their extensive empire. One obvious way to increase the population would have been to allow outsiders to integrate into their society, but this radically contradicted the strict, entrenched rules that Sparta had steadfastly followed for centuries. Sparta's internal system not only hindered any attempts to expand the number of Spartan citizens but also practically ruled out the possibility of rapidly training a significant number of new warriors. The only path to obtaining the status of a Spartan fighter was the successful completion of the agoge. A crucial condition of this grueling process was the requirement that each trainee independently acquired the necessary equipment and endured all stages of the harsh and intensive training course. Anyone who failed to meet these requirements was denied the right to become a full Spartan warrior. Given that far from everyone who began their journey in the agoge reached the end, the number of Spartan soldiers steadily declined. This state of affairs forced Sparta to rely heavily on recruiting outsiders to augment its military formations. However, these mercenary or allied fighters rarely possessed a level of training comparable to that of true Spartans, and their loyalty to Spartan ideals was significantly lower than that of native citizens. Nevertheless, it was not only the depletion of military ranks and the inevitable need for external support that determined Sparta's decline in the post-Peloponnesian War period. Alongside these external difficulties, the Spartan elite began to succumb to the temptation of avarice, gradually forgetting their initial and sacred ideals, honor and selfless defense of the state. Among Spartan commanders and soldiers, a desire to satisfy personal ambitions became increasingly apparent, pushing concerns for strengthening Sparta's state power into the background. Such a shift in values, as well as an insatiable thirst for accumulating personal wealth instead of augmenting state capital, led to deep economic stratification within Spartan society. Consequently, some citizens achieved unprecedented prosperity, while others steadily plunged into poverty. As expected, such economic polarization provoked significant social tension among the Spartans. However, the emerging wealth inequality brought about another serious problem, which further exacerbated the reduction in the number of Spartan warriors. As Spartan families became impoverished, they found themselves unable to provide the necessary armor and equipment required for their children to participate in the agoge training system. The issue was not that these young citizens lacked the potential to become outstanding warriors, but rather that the inability to acquire their own equipment automatically deprived them of the opportunity to train as Spartan soldiers. It remains unclear how deeply the ruling elite, including the kings of Sparta and other influential members of society, understood this growing problem, or whether they showed complete indifference to its consequences. Meanwhile, disenfranchised Spartan citizens increasingly expressed their dissatisfaction with how their city-state was governed, being deprived of the opportunity to fulfill their sacred martial duty. The lack of a constant influx of fresh recruits undermined the very foundation upon which the Spartan state's existence rested. By 375 BC, Sparta's position had reached a critical point. Throughout Hellas, rebels were rising, and former adversaries showed a steady increase in influence. One city-state, in particular, became a painful thorn in Spartan ambitions. It was this region that was destined to play a fateful role in the decline of Spartan hegemony. Thebes, for decades after Sparta's triumph in the Peloponnesian Wars, showed a steady rise in political and military power. Despite Spartan garrisons maintaining control over the region for almost 3 decades, their influence gradually waned, and their positions in Thebes were constantly eroding. This state of affairs was completely unacceptable to the proud Spartans, and they immediately launched a large-scale military campaign aimed at the complete subjugation of the Thebans. In 371 BC, King Cleombrotus I personally led Spartan troops against the talented Theban strategist Epaminondas, who commanded the army of the Boeotian League. This fateful battle, fought at Leuctra, not only yielded an unexpected outcome but also forever changed the course of Greek history. King Cleombrotus commanded just over 10,000 soldiers. However, due to a severe shortage of native Spartan citizens, only about 700 of them were true Spartiates, hereditary warriors who had undergone the rigorous agoge. This meant that the remaining warriors, while capable of valor in battle, would never achieve the unprecedented effectiveness and discipline inherent in an army composed solely of 10,000 Spartan hoplites. This personnel situation reflected the harsh reality of Spartan warfare. Even the supreme ruler had to contend with only a negligible number of true Spartans in his ranks. In addition to the infantry, Cleombrotus had a contingent of approximately 1,000 cavalry, intended to reinforce the flanks and conduct reconnaissance. After many years dedicated to the tireless struggle to maintain dominance over a vast empire, Sparta faced growing discontent. Warriors recruited from subject city-states, known as helots, showed far less zeal in upcoming battles than the ambitions of the Spartan monarch demanded. On the opposite side of the battlefield stood the Theban army, numbering an impressive 7,000 hoplites and 600 cavalry. Commander Epaminondas was well aware that Theban cavalry was deservedly considered among the best in all of Hellas, and he undoubtedly intended to exploit this superiority in his tactical designs. However, Thebes' most valuable asset was Epaminondas himself, an outstanding military strategist. He already had several brilliant victories to his name and was determined to make Sparta pay for years of oppression of the Theban people. Many Theban commanders persistently advised Epaminondas to retreat behind the strong fortifications of Thebes to force the Spartans into a grueling siege of the city. However, Epaminondas, possessing an unyielding will, had no intention of succumbing to Spartan pressure. Retreat was not considered an acceptable solution by him. He was firmly confident in his ability to outwit the Spartan warriors, as he had carefully studied their favored military strategy. For many centuries, the Spartans had employed the same phalanx tactic, which almost always led them to success. Nevertheless, Epaminondas developed an innovative plan capable of breaking through Sparta's orderly ranks and allowing his troops to inflict a decisive and irreversible defeat on the enemy. At the very beginning of the grand battle, Commander Cleombrotus acted exactly as the far-sighted Epaminondas had predicted. In the historic Battle of Leuctra, the Spartan warriors formed a classic phalanx, 12 ranks deep, with clearly defined right and left flanks. Following established military tradition, the right flank was significantly reinforced, and it was there that Cleombrotus was positioned, surrounded by 300 bodyguards. Epaminondas, observing the predictability in the enemy's formation, decided to exploit their adherence to outdated tactical principles. In response, Epaminondas reconfigured his forces, concentrating 50 ranks on the left flank while simultaneously reducing the overall length of his formation. This maneuver was aimed at creating a powerful striking force. In addition to this, Epaminondas also deployed cavalry on the left flank to maximize the destructive power of the attack and crush the Spartan phalanx. When the two armies clashed, the battlefield became a chaotic slaughter. Spears pierced bodies, shields splintered, and warriors fell, struck dead. The ground quickly became stained with blood, but at this crucial moment, a turning point occurred. The Spartan defensive line wavered and was breached. This breach opened the way for the Theban cavalry, who surged into the enemy ranks, causing panic. The cavalry was followed by infantry, outflanking the Spartans. Cleombrotus's position and that of his army deteriorated, foreshadowing an inevitable defeat. Epaminondas ordered his troops to attack at an angle to the left, strategically pushing Cleombrotus and his warriors away from the main battle, depriving them of the ability to support their broken defensive line. In a desperate attempt to change the course of the battle, Cleombrotus led his men in a counterattack, but encountered the elite Theban sacred band. In this decisive engagement, Cleombrotus fell, and the Spartans began to retreat. The Battle of Leuctra marked Sparta's first significant failure in a major engagement for some time, signaling a turning point for the entire Spartan state and foreshadowing a series of future setbacks. Epaminondas, capitalizing on the strategic advantage afforded by the defeat of Cleombrotus and his warriors, continued his advance deep into Spartan territory. His objective was not to conquer lands and enslave peoples, but to liberate them from Spartan oppression. Epaminondas understood perfectly that by inciting a revolt among the Helots and other people dependent on the Spartans, he could strike a devastating blow to the empire's power. Following the crushing defeat at Leuctra, the Peloponnesian League, once a bastion of Spartan influence, finally disintegrated. Most of Sparta's former allies, recognizing its weakening, decided that continued participation in the league was pointless. Sparta was rapidly losing its greatness, transforming from a leader into a burden, rather than a reliable protector. At the same time, within the country, Helots and slaves, who formed the backbone of the Spartan state's labor force, began to offer active resistance, striving to cast off centuries of servitude. Throughout Hellas, independent city-states once again flourished, heralding a new era of political fragmentation and sovereignty. Having achieved a triumphant victory over Sparta, Thebes rapidly rose to become the undisputed leader and most powerful polis in the region. Their ambitions extended to creating a new, vast empire, which aroused apprehension and resistance from many other Greek cities unwilling to submit to the new hegemony. In an attempt to prevent further bloodshed and stabilize the fragile balance of power, Athens tried to organize a general peace conference in 371 BC. However, the Thebans, intoxicated by their successes, categorically rejected this initiative. Instead, they continued military operations, crushing the remnants of Spartan forces and completely expelling them from their own territories. It seemed that nothing could stop their expansion, and this feeling was entirely justified. The situation in ancient Greece escalated to its limit, forcing sworn enemies, Sparta and Athens, to set aside centuries of animosity. Faced with the common threat posed by Thebes, they united their efforts to repel the shared adversary. However, Thebes, in turn, found an unexpected ally, a power that for centuries had represented a danger to Greek civilization and independence. Thebes forged a strategic alliance with Persia, whose military might and material resources provided substantial support for their ambitious plans to conquer Greece. This strong alliance demonstrated its superiority, achieving victories over the combined forces of Sparta and Athens. Spartan warriors, confronted by superior enemy forces, were compelled to retreat, and their native city remained their sole refuge. Despite the loss of its vast empire and former political influence, Sparta managed to retain its status as an independent polis. Although Spartan warriors were still renowned, the Peloponnesian War had inflicted irreparable damage on their resources and strength. Their military contingent was sufficient only for deterring potential threats from other city-states, while the Spartans frantically attempted to regroup and develop a future strategy. By some estimates, Sparta's civilian population more than halved, from 9,000 to 4,000 people, between its heyday and the defeat at the Battle of Leuctra. This demographic decline was caused by enormous military losses on the battlefields, even in battles that Sparta won. With a weakened army and a shortage of young citizens fit for military training, Sparta lost its ability to conquer new territories and enslave their inhabitants as helots to replenish its ranks and sustain its economy. The demographic crisis in Sparta reached unprecedented levels, threatening the very existence of this martial state. The number of Spartiates, the citizens of Sparta, catastrophically dwindled, weakening the city-state's military power and political influence. The situation became so critical that the Spartan leadership had to resort to an unprecedented measure, allowing non-citizens into their society, hoping to increase the population. However, even this desperate step could not reverse the negative trend. While the Spartan population steadily declined, neighboring polis experienced a demographic boom, leading to a shift in the balance of power in the region. A weakened Sparta no longer instilled the same fear in its neighbors. For over a century, Sparta remained in a state of profound isolation. Although Spartan warriors continued to conduct occasional raids on nearby territories, their military potential clearly did not match their former glory. Sparta suffered from a severe shortage of resources and manpower, necessary not only for a resurgence of its past greatness but also for effective defense against external threats. The last ruler of independent Sparta was Nabis, a man whose ascent to power was marked by cruelty and cunning. After seizing the throne, he ordered the execution of 2 other Spartans whose claims to the throne were more legitimate. To completely eliminate the possibility of future opposition, Nabis ruthlessly exterminated their noble families, depriving Sparta of potential leaders. In contrast to the idealized image of a Spartan warrior, Nabis was neither noble nor impeccably honorable. On the contrary, he was characterized by greed and selfishness. Upon becoming ruler, Nabis decided that it was time for Sparta to reclaim at least some of its former glory, but his motivation was far from concern for the welfare of ordinary Spartans. Nabis sought to revive the state solely to consolidate his own power and enrich himself. During the Macedonian Wars, Nabis initially supported Macedon, which allowed Sparta to expand its territories. However, when military fortune turned against the Macedonians, Nabis, demonstrating his characteristic opportunism, immediately switched allegiance to Rome. Subsequently, a peace treaty was concluded between Rome and Macedon, but Nabis continued to harbor ambitious plans for creating a vast Spartan empire. On the historical stage, events unfolded that heralded the Laconic War, which began in 195 BC. Sparta, entering this conflict, faced a formidable coalition that included the Roman Republic, the Achaean League, the Kingdom of Pergamon, Rhodes, and Macedon. It is important to note that during the Macedonian Wars, the Spartans had established control over Argos, and in recognition of their military prowess and participation in conflicts, Rome allowed Sparta to retain this territory. Subsequently, Argos was integrated into Laconia, a vast region of Greece under complete Spartan dominion. Ruler Nabis, seeking to consolidate his power and implement social reforms, resorted to radical measures. He confiscated property and landholdings from the wealthy aristocrats of Argos, to then redistribute them among helots who had shown personal loyalty. Alongside internal reforms, Nabis actively engaged in building up Sparta's military might. He initiated the construction of a powerful fleet and undertook extensive work to strengthen the city walls, preparing for future challenges and ensuring the state's security. In the social sphere, his efforts were aimed at expanding economic opportunities for Spartan citizens, which, in his opinion, would contribute to the revival and strengthening of the Spartan army. However, this process progressed rather slowly. Nabis also freed slaves in Argos, who were immediately conscripted as helots to bolster the ranks of the Spartan armed forces. Thus, for many of them, this liberation effectively meant merely a transition to the rule of a new oppressor. Nabis, as many then believed, was steadily moving towards fulfilling his ambitious promise, to restore Sparta's former power and create a much more formidable state. However, he was not destined to witness the ultimate realization of these far-reaching plans. After the conclusion of the bloody Macedonian War, the Spartans displayed unyielding resolve, categorically refusing to cede their newly acquired territories. Rome, seeking to avoid further military clashes, attempted a diplomatic settlement, insisting that Nabis hand over the strategically important Argos to the Achaean League. But the Spartan ruler remained unyielding, rejecting these demands. Such stubbornness inevitably led to the formidable coalition, comprising Greek polis and powerful Roman legions, being forced to declare war on Sparta. Sparta endured a tragic period in its history. Soon after the declaration of war, Rome and its allies launched a large-scale offensive against the coastal cities of Laconia, systematically stripping Sparta of control over them. Simultaneously, the Achaean League, demonstrating its resolve, stormed and definitively captured Argos. It became increasingly evident that Sparta, despite all of Nabis' efforts, did not possess sufficient power to withstand the combined force of Rome and the influential Greek polis. This devastating blow proved fatal for Spartan statehood. All previous achievements were undone, and Sparta had neither the strength nor the time to restore its fading civilization in the face of impending upheavals. As a result of these events, Sparta lost its independence, falling under strict Roman control. Nabis continued to rule for some time, but his reign ended tragically. He was assassinated in 192 BC. With the death of the last king of free Sparta, all hopes and dreams of a revival of the Spartan state collapsed. After the conclusion of the Laconic War, the Achaean League sought to maintain diplomatic relations with powerful Rome, while independently managing the internal affairs of its part of Greece. However, Rome clearly outlined its position. The Achaean League was forbidden from further territorial expansion, especially towards Sparta. Despite the Achaeans' long-standing desire to incorporate Sparta into their fold, which arose during the Laconic War, they refrained from this step, fearing Rome's displeasure. The problem was that persistent Spartan raids on Achaean territory continued to be a source of concern, causing growing discontent and feeling like a heavy burden. When the Achaean League appealed to Rome for a solution to this problem, the response was rather restrained. The Romans merely dispatched a diplomatic mission for a peaceful settlement of the conflict. Unfortunately, Sparta ignored the terms of the agreement reached through these diplomatic efforts. In 148 BC, having exhausted its patience due to the incessant provocations, the Achaean League moved to decisive action, launching a full-scale invasion of Spartan territory. Achaean troops triumphantly entered the city-state, establishing complete control over the Spartan population, subjecting it to their will. However, the Roman Republic, viewing this act as an unacceptable violation of previously reached agreements, immediately responded with a military invasion of Achaea. Sparta, seeing an opportunity, once again asserted its right to independence and fiercely resisted its recent subjugators. Thus, the Achaean League found itself in a critical position, forced to simultaneously fight both a resurgent Sparta and a powerful Roman army. Such a combination of military threats proved an unbearable burden for the Achaean League, determining its subsequent fate. Roman legions, rapidly advancing through Greek lands, relentlessly asserted their authority. The Achaeans, having lost trust and the ability to make independent decisions, found themselves powerless. The Roman statesman Lucius Mummius ordered the destruction of the defensive walls of cities that had participated in the Achaean League's revolt. This large-scale restructuring of the region under Roman rule included the complete subjugation of Sparta. In time, Rome, showing some leniency, allowed Sparta and Athens to regain their status as independent city-states. However, for Sparta, this newfound freedom held little value, as the prolonged period of occupation had led to the loss of almost all the unique features that defined its civilization. In AD 267, the Goths, invading Greece from the north, brutally sacked Sparta. The once formidable Spartans proved unable to defend even their homeland. Thus concluded the fall of one of the most distinguished Greek powers in history. The history of Sparta presents an example of astonishing transformation, from inconspicuous nomadic tribes to a hegemon whose military might was able to halt Xerxes' advance with just 300 warriors. The Spartans subjugated Athens and forged an impressive empire, extending their influence over significant territories. However, as is often the case in history, success went to their heads. Perhaps they overestimated their own strength, which led to the rapid collapse of everything they had so painstakingly built. Despite the relentless march of history, the Spartans strived to their last breath to preserve their unique identity, their customs, and traditions. But, alas, their efforts proved futile, they were ultimately conquered, and their independence was lost. Yet, even today, centuries later, the memory of the Spartans lives on in the hearts and minds of people. They remain in the annals of history as one of the greatest warrior civilizations, whose heroism and selflessness have become legendary. Their image inspires and captivates, reminding us of the strength of spirit and devotion to their ideals.